Welcome. This is our second meetup. We had the first one at was it oDesk or Elan? Oh yeah, I get them confused.
For those of you who weren't here, at the end of the event hosted by Elance, Andrew thanked oDesk for hosting, which I took a lot of pleasure in. So I appreciate that.
Yes.
And
yeah.
Shortly thereafter, we announced the merger, so thank you.
So be careful what I say about MBO partners and work marketing. No, don't. Okay, well, so this is our second meetup, and tonight we're going to, the last meetup we talked broadly about human cloud platforms and enterprise adoption, and tonight we're going to be talking about a specific type of human cloud platform, what we've been calling online staffing platforms. What distinguishes online staffing platforms is that they create a one-to-one relationship, in effect, between an organization that is hiring and an individual or multiple individuals that are going to be working and get that whole work arrangement done via an online platform. So we're going to be talking about that today. A lot has been changing. The major subject is going to be what's changing and where are things headed as we move into 2014. So I'd like to thank oDesk for properly speaking, for hosting tonight. It's a wonderful venue, and thanks for all of the preparations. I'd like to thank all of you for being here, and I'd like to thank our esteemed panel. We have a really great panel tonight that really is going to reflect and be able to talk about this particular subject. So I'd like to start off by having, if you could, just each of you introduce yourself and your company, and maybe just kind of give us maybe 3 things that really characterize and differentiate what your online staffing platform business is about, if you can. I know I didn't put that one in the questions, but you don't have to answer.
Why did we do all the preparation if he's going to ask us questions?
That's the last.
Right
that's
off
the last curveball.
Yeah, I bet. Matt Cooper, I'm our oDesk's VP of Business Development International. So I've been working on our enterprise business for the last couple of years. In terms of what I think makes us different, first of all, just the scale. We have close to 5 million freelancers and 1 million clients on oDesk. So we've got a lot of liquidity, very wide range of tasks, everything from the basic data entry all the way up to high-end architecture, and from short $50 projects to long-term, full-time. So we really sort of covered the gamut in both, the scale and scope of work performed. We have been making a big push in the enterprise in the last couple of years.
Right.
So we do have a pretty sizable enterprise business. It's about 10% of our revenue today. And we see that expanding rapidly in the coming years as enterprise adoption, just more mainstream adoption in general, picks up. The third thing, we have been investing a lot in trying to make our platform easier to use for the mainstream buyer. I think historically, online work has been it's been early adopters, innovator crowd, people who are more than happy to do something new and different just because it is new and different. But I think to expand the market and to grow into what we think our business could become, it's going to take a more mainstream buyer to get us there.
Right.
So everything from how we match up the jobs with the freelancers, user experience, trust and safety, payment. We've been putting a lot into our platform with the mindset of how do we make it easier for just the average person walking in the door to get up and running and have a great experience.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah.
Gene Zaino, founder, president, CEO of MBO Partners. When you start a company, you give yourself a lot of titles. So MBO Partners is all about the independent professional. We provide management services to what I would call the solo employed professional and the clients that use them. What makes us different is we are truly, our customer is truly that individual. And I don't think many other organizations could say that. We cater to the individual, that is who our client is. However,
Individual professional worker.
the actual professional worker. In spite of that, however, about 80% of our business is enterprise. And I think as a result of the fact that we cater to that individual worker and we make their life better and compliant, tax efficient, and convenient, that makes the enterprise work well with us, who wants to attract high-level talent that we think is really the rise of the expert economy of the independents. Another thing that makes us different is we've processed about $2 billion of independent contractor services over the last decade, but we don't have millions of people. We have about 30,000 people that we've processed for. So it's a different market. Our average project size are about $30,000 a pop. And people stay with us for many, many years as they use MVO to run their business operations in their back office.
Great.
I don't know if that was 3, but that was enough.
Yeah, I think that's good. That's very clear. Yeah, tame you, James. Yeah.
My name is Jeff Wald. I'm the founder, COO, CFO, and a host of other titles of WorkMarket. WorkMarket is a platform for managing on-demand labor and scale. And so there are 2 words in there that I would point to as differentiators. First is platform. And I think a lot of the companies that are in the online staffing space are marketplaces. And marketplaces and platforms are very, very different products. We have a marketplace attached to our product, but it's pretty nascent, right? There are only about 37,000 people in the WorkMarket marketplace. There are several 100,000 people that use WorkMarket, but only 37,000 made it into the marketplace. A platform is a software process for managing a process and scale, right? So we go into customers and we say, how do you manage your contractors today? Let us show you how you can do it faster, better, and cheaper using WorkMarket. So because it's a platform, it is industry agnostic. So we have companies from IT services to field marketing to sales to legal to healthcare, all using the platform, and it is customizable to their workflow. Again, because it's a platform. Now I have almost no marketplaces in almost all of those flows. The vast majority of people in my marketplace are IT services and field marketing workers, right? So that the distinction between being a platform, being industry agnostic, we also are very focused on kind of the one-to-many relationship, appreciating that online staffing allows for a one-to-one relationship, discovering a new person. A marketplace is really about find, right? We break the process down into 6 steps: find, verify, engage, manage, pay, and rate. Marketplaces
You
are
can only speak
amazing.
about 3.
I don't know, but there's my 6 modules. 6 modules. Marketplaces are great at find. They're amazing at find, right? But to go through all 6 steps, you really need a platform to go do that. And so when our customers do it, they're doing it to manage an army of tens of thousands of people. That's the group that they are managing, not looking to find a discrete person to perform a discrete task, but to have an army of tens of thousands, because we have 1,000 tasks we need to do every single day. And so that's what our platform does.
And no, that's very interesting, and actually we should have a discussion about that.
We're here now.
Yeah, I don't want to go into that right now because I think we would get into a long discussion that might be esoteric. But I do want to clarify one thing. I don't know. My view, I understand what you're saying, and I agree with you. In my view, a platform is something that can support many different kinds of services, and one of those services can be a marketplace, and the platform can also support other kinds of services. But that's just, it's just a different perspective. The reason why I bring that up is because, with the exception of Gene, maybe all of your companies provide marketplaces, although now with your partnership with WorkMarket, an interesting thing, you do provide a marketplace. But what I wanted to say was that just before we move on, just to be clear, in terms of the platforms, the oDesk platform supports online work, online freelancers, and a lot of the functionality in it is a marketplace. It involves marketplace, but there are other things. In the case of MBO Partners and Work Market, MBO Partners and Work Market support on-site work for the most part, at least at this stage of the game. And
Sure.
the same true, of course, for oDesk. But I just wanted that distinction to be clear. And basically, the way we're going to conduct this panel is I'm going to speak just for about 3 minutes, just to kind of set a context about the segment, the online staffing segment, and how it's evolved. And then there's a series of questions that I'm just going to kind of toss out there to the panelists and have them respond as they see appropriate. And there can be more discussion. If you have a question, not off track, but relevant to the discussion, please raise your hand, and or if you have a significant comment, please go ahead and once again, a relevant comment, please raise your hand, and we'll get you. We'd like to get you into the discussion. So this isn't a talk show. I'm not Zaino, as was pointed out to me earlier. In any case, so we'd like to kind of keep it fluid. So in any case, as we said before, we're going to talk about online staffing and what are the significant changes going on in this segment, and what do they mean, and where are things heading? And that's really the theme for tonight's talk and panel. And so the context that I wanted to provide is that online staffing, originally in my notes I had said that it's something that dates back to around the year 2000. And I learned today from Edward Jackson that actually he had an online staffing firm in, was it 1998?
Before the term.
Yeah, that was kind of one of the really pilot
Too
firms.
early.
But it was early, yes. So there were some sparks of innovation that were occurring at that time. But there was a long phase from about, let's say, 1998, 1999 to around 2012, where basically what we saw were certain types of online staffing firms that, I've called them freelancer marketplace platforms. And basically the principle was we're gonna put a platform in place that will allow workers anywhere, freelancer workers anywhere, to connect with businesses and vice versa. And there were some early examples of that. In the early 2000s, companies like VWorker come to mind, which got rolled up somewhere. I think it may be a part of freelancer.com by now. But there were maybe by 2011, in this initial phase of the segment development, maybe 50 companies or so. Things were slow until, of course, Elance and oDesk got started around roughly 2005. We won't get into the date question, but things really got started, and volume really started to pick up among those online freelancer types of platforms during the big recession, and so we got out to around 2012 approximately, and that's where I see another stage of development in the segment starting to layer in, and that's where we started to see firms like Work Market appear, firms that were now starting to focus on not just online work, but also intermediating work arrangements for on-site workers. And that has been a part of the segment that has started to grow and has really characterized, I think, this second phase of development. What's gone along with that has been, whereas the earlier types of firms were approaching small businesses, in the second phase, some of these online platforms, including oDesk and some of the others, and of course MBO Partners and Work Market and some others, began trying to approach enterprises, which is a completely different model for providing contract work. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. We're going to get into that. The third stage has really been, I think it's really started just in the last year, and that is where we're starting to see things really open up. And in the prior stages, online staffing platforms were kind of separate things. They started as separate businesses. And also they were very separate from the traditional staffing industry. And what we started to see in 2013, and we're seeing ramping up, is now all of these different platform firms are starting to, and the staffing industry, are starting to engage. And the platforms, the online platforms, are also starting to engage with other types of digital services businesses, and kind of creating ecosystems of services that can support the intermediation of work. And so these might be things like skill testing, assessment, analytics for curation of workers. And so I know I've gone way over 3 minutes, so we're going to talk mainly today about, and the questions are going to be about the second and third stages, okay? If all of that was vaguely clear. So let's go back to the second stage, which is where on-site work, addressing enterprise demand, starting to maybe become more specialized and segmented and verticalized in different ways, where that type of development, it's just been over the past several years, has started to occur. So here's my first question. Okay, so one of the big developments in stage 2 has been platforms that are intermediating on-site work arrangements, which we just said, not just online freelancer work arrangements. How are these kinds of platforms different, if at all? So, we know that online platforms like oDesk span vast geographies, many, deal with online workers and not on-site workers. But what are the differences, and what are the challenges that lie ahead for each of these kinds of platforms? I imagine they're different. So who wants to start?
I think, first of all, I want to say the reason why I think stage 3 happened is because you went to the industry, quite honestly. I really mean that. I think you brought a tremendous amount of focus on this industry and formalized it, so I really mean that. But I would say that to answer your question, I think what's needed, and I've always been thinking this for years, the contracting or freelance or whatever you want to call it business is a spectrum of different kinds of things. And I think what you're going to see is by different types of projects or by different types of people, there's going to be deeper, more specialized areas that, maybe oDesk, Elance, Work Market, whoever is going to start building certain areas of expertise. But I think the type of project and type of work is going to require different things. I don't think one size fits all. I don't think CMS has solved the problem for everything, and certainly I don't think any one tool is going to work for the entire spectrum.
So there are going to be many different kinds of platforms, and to serve different types of segments and needs.
I think it's unbundling and it's going to get specific in each area.
Well, you also add value in different places. So when you're managing online teams, it's discovery is a big issue. Management of a remote team, communications, collaboration.
So what is the difference between online and on-site work platforms?
Well, I think for an on-site local worker, compliance takes a bigger issue. Adding value to how you track time. They're sitting next to you. It's just that's not as big of an issue when somebody's sitting next to you every day. You're not worried about where their time is being spent, and whether or not they're working. So I think there's the value, where you add value in your platform shifts depending on whether
that's
local or offsites. We're sort of developing disparate feature sets to solve different problems.
Which goes to Jane's point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would completely agree with that. When you're dealing with on-site work, there are a host of issues that come to the fore that are different than remote work. And so I think Matt's exactly right. When you are dealing with people that are closer to you, you do have a much bigger compliance issue, and as much as they could be deemed to be an employee, so you have a worker misclassification issue. If they are going to be doing on-site work, you now have an insurance issue around workers' comp and general liability and E&O, and a host of things that you simply don't have offline and in a remote worker.
Yeah, and we'll have enterprise clients who give us the enterprise contracts, and it's talking about indemnification if somebody chops off their finger in a buzzsaw. It's like, I don't think that happens in online work. So there's just we have a different set of problems to address.
So one of the things is that you mentioned platforms having different services is, I think what's happened in stage one, I guess, is marketplace platforms to figure out how to put people together. I think you're going to now start seeing much more focus on engagement enablement. So
What do you mean by that?
what does it take to engage this particular type of worker? And I think it depends on that type of worker and that type of project. And certainly in the enterprise where you could have large numbers of people, the bar gets raised quite a bit. And there's different issues to take in place. Like Matt said, there are people working next to you, and I think you become a larger target. And I think you have the risk of people aggregating together and creating problems. And when things are dispersed and small numbers, that's wonderful. Once you start getting people that are sitting either near each other or in large numbers or large projects, the actual interface of the engagement is now as important than as the matching of the talent.
No, I'll just build on that a little bit, and I'm going to go back to phase one here. So one of the initial impetuses for us founding Work Market was a paper written by a guy named Ronald Coase. It was called The Nature of the Firm. And it talked about what is the idealized structure of a corporation. An idealized structure of a corporation is a very, very small fixed cost kernel, and everything else engaged via contract, variabilized labor. But it was determined by Nobel laureate Coase that that was not possible. Right? The transaction cost made that inefficient to do. Meaning companies have always wanted to have a flexible on-demand workforce, but they never had the tools to do it. I think that you had a bunch of pioneers that came out, in phase one, oDesk and Elance being the leaders among them, that started to make people understand that you could start to do this. But now that you could do it, it was mostly being done in the beginning on a remote basis. But now you have corporations say, all right, well now I can start disaggregating processes. And those processes are internal processes, right? There are things that are core to what they do. Now all of a sudden they can use a flexible on-demand workforce to do it. But those workforces were on-site people. It was no longer not very small, but minute tasks, right? Very discrete projects of, we need a new logo, we need a new website, we need a new design project. Now it was, I've got 1,000 things to deliver over the next 2 weeks, and I need people all over the country to go and do them. And that's what I do every single day, so I need an army of 10,000 people to do it. They got comfort with doing it because of all the different things that happened in the remote world, and that led to people saying, all right, I can now start to do this. I can utilize a variabilized workforce, and those workforces happen to be on site.
I guess, before moving on to the question about enterprise versus small business, and which is kind of a big emerging issue in stage two, it strikes me too that, for kind of online work platforms versus on-site work platforms, online work platforms do not so much have to deal with kind of locational logistics of workers, and you do have to deal with other things,
Right.
But in the case of on-site workers, of course, that's a whole maybe set of services of the platform, of a platform that may, in some applications, maybe not in all, that need to be attended to. And I guess in the case of remote, there's a whole set of needs associated with remote online workers that come into play.
It's true, we have a parts logistics module. Right, our customers need their resources to go and pick up a part from a third-party location, send that part back. Those are things that just don't exist, right, in the online remote world.
Right.
But they're things that we had to build in order to show up for the on-site world.
Yeah. So, the next question here was, one of the other shifts in phase two that we see is, of course, in phase one, companies like oDesk, the major market, almost 100% of it up until more recently, was smaller businesses. Sure, there were individual enterprise users who were paying for online work, but now, of course, we're seeing more and more companies, online platform companies, trying to address enterprise demand, even oDesk, and that's a whole new horizon for the whole online platform segment and industry. So what does that mean? And what's different?
I think the attitudes we see around online work today versus 3 years ago, it's night and day. So I think our enterprise business started in late 2009, early 2010 with one very large company that is an innovator, an early adopter. They're always trying new things. And they came to us with one specific problem around localization. And they wanted to build a different localization model. They didn't like the multi-language vendor gives it to the single language vendor who gives it to the local contractor in country, and then it works its way back up the chain. It was old school, messy, lots of middlemen. And so they saw the opportunity to build a new model via online work. And so we solved that problem for them, and then that led to the next one and the next one. And we evolved around solving very specific operational problems. So in the early days, it was less about the platform, more about the vertical use case.
Right.
So as we evolved our enterprise business, it was very much around solving one specific problem. So we're going to help you build a localization team, or we're going to help you build a data management team, or a content creation team.
So would that be an agreement that oDesk would have with individual departments, or?
Yeah, so usually we were talking to sort of a director or maybe VP level in a larger company that had a very specific operational challenge that they couldn't fix, or they wanted to fix it in a different way than outsourcing it.
Right.
And so we would come in and find ways to map an old school sort of vendor-centric process to a distributed online work process.
Interesting. So now WorkMarket and MBO partners, unlike oDesk, which has been serving small businesses and now moving into the enterprise market and delivering online work there, MBO and WorkMarket have been firmly addressing the enterprise space, and but bringing now new online platforms, online staffing platforms to meet demand. How is that working, and what is happening there?
So what I think is happening where the market is softening up to this now on the enterprise side, other than you, I think that
Yeah.
I think what's happening is there's the democratization of labor, of work, and I think there's now more of a open talent economy, and LinkedIn kind of unveiled like everybody can put their profiles up now, right? So it's more accepted, and I think what's happening is managers, hiring managers, are self-sourcing talent or accumulating buckets of talent that they want to use, and if it's more specialized, I think they tend to also be more independent. And it's kind of like what happened with IT 50 years, maybe 30 years ago, where everything was centralized and you have to do it our way. Now it's bring your own device, right? I believe it's going to soon be bring your own worker, and people are going to be their own thing. And what's needed, and the reason why we found the WorkMarket relationship to be very valuable to us and to our clients is because they're accumulating all these people. They're not looking to go out there into a marketplace to find people. They're looking to organize the thousands or hundreds of experts they have throughout their organization, so that this manager here is not going to use the same person that this manager here is going to use through an intermediary that they're paying 30%, 40%, 50%, and that the managers want to do it themselves anyway.
Right.
So it's really disintermediating and
So
spreading out.
I mean, there is a whole. Go ahead.
Well, I just to just add on to that point, we're all temporaries. It's just a matter of degrees, and the idea that if I'm a contractor at XYZ local tech company, somehow depending on the company, it's either 6 months or 12 months or 24 months. Now it's danger zone. Like literally that one day all of a sudden makes a difference. It's just the regulatory environment is pushing us to do unnatural things. People want the clients, the companies certainly want a more flexible way of engaging. And I think what's shifting is the workers want a more flexible way of engaging. They don't, the idea of working for one company for your entire life being the safe thing to do doesn't sound like such a great idea anymore.
But I mean, the enterprises they have worked very hard to create very rigorous, structures to control how contingent workers
But
are.
that's all in response to the regulatory framework. If the laws changed and said, we're gonna, and the regulatory issues are all about tax leakage. If the US government wasn't worried about tax leakage, they wouldn't be shoving everybody into an employment box, and the companies wouldn't be worried so much about work classification.
Payroll taxes,
So
I think you
it's
said
about
payroll
getting a call from the
taxes.
California
Yeah.
Unemployment Commission saying, you
Fund
sent this guy as a
society,
contractor
yes.
and he's an employee.
Right.
So, I think we're,
So how's it gonna, I mean, Gene and Jeff, how is that whole edifice going to adjust to allow, more contingent workforce that is provided
I think it's a great opportunity.
flexibly?
Post-World War II, there was your traditional W-2 employment model. I think ADP and Paychex created a great infrastructure business. I think in the 21st century, there's going to be a new business of how to deal with an infrastructure to support this new way of work without starving our government for taxes.
You know, companies have always wanted to work this way, and now increasingly individuals want to work this way, where they want to make that lifestyle decision as long as they can earn enough money to actually have a lifestyle. But the government needs to catch up, right? They need to adjust the way labor is going to be taxed, but I don't think anybody expects that to happen in the very near term. Right? That's going to be a painful evolution.
So how are, one of the major kind of questions that has come up, in phase one about staffing platforms is that they're not equipped to kind of deal with the legal and compliance requirements that may apply in larger enterprises. I don't know, is that true? And, if so, can that be changed? Is there a way for, are online staffing platforms hitting a barrier because of that?
Well, we would say no.
Okay,
I
well,
would agree. I think we made investments in our oDesk payroll model we built that in 2009, 2010. So we've been able to W-2 workers for US-based companies, hiring US-based workers for a long time now. So I think, every, oDesk and Elance, we've both made a lot of investments in making sure that we can get the traditional businesses comfortable using our model.
So I think that's a problem. I think until we get, who's the IBM person here? Until we get Mr. Watson, the computer, to solve case law, I don't think you could automate and mechanicalize what today is a very gray area of the law. And unfortunately, it's gray, I believe, intentionally, so that different agencies could overreach and decide, I'm going to just give you a bill. Unfortunately, that's the way the world works. And that's why I think it's up to us in this room to come up with tools and technologies that's going to still enable this contract and independent work to thrive, which it's going to happen, but do it in a way where there's the tools and the processes and the engagement, which I think is the key, which is kind of what I do with both these guys, is there needs to be that, how do you deal with making sure all these individual solo one-person companies are compliant? And it's really hard for a one-person company to be a compliant legal entity. And I think the tools that are out there, and there's lots of pieces to it, are what's going to make it happen.
Yeah, we get the question a lot around, how does this freelancer economy impact the individual? There's no 401k, there's no security, there's all this risk. These people running their own businesses. When you start up a restaurant or a coffee shop or whatever your small business is, you're not going into it because you want security and safety and consistency. If you want that, go to work for the DMV. So I think
it's right around the corner.
So I think when we talk to the workers, they want freedom, they want control. I think that's this mindset that somehow we're protecting everybody by shoving them into an employment box. We're not doing ourselves any favors.
Well, I don't know, Jeff, do you have anything to add to this? Because your Work Market is kind of the company that, is, what you're known for is bringing an online staffing platform to the enterprise. That's what you started doing, that's what you're doing.
It is, but
what's been your experience? Or what do you want to say?
I'll tell you a negative experience we had, right? So this online staffing world that Andrew's helped define, there's about $1.5 billion in gross billings that went through it in 2013. We had a meeting with one of the largest firms in the world, and they themselves spend about $4 billion a year on contractors. Showed them the platform, showed them the marketplaces and the algorithms and all the group functionality and all these little things that we do. that I think bring tremendous value to smaller companies. And he said, oh, that's amazing. Who's going to W-2 these people? And I just stared at him. I said, I don't know. You? Kindly asked to leave. At the end of the day, he needed somebody to W-2 everybody in that flow, right? He liked the technology, he liked the marketplace, he liked all the things that we did around compliance. But at the end of the day, some things that Gene talks about that are so, so difficult, they just don't want that risk, right? And that is why they just use their VMS and they just throw it to different staffing firms. And they know that they're paying way, way, way too much for that labor, but they will not in any way, shape, or form tolerate that risk. There are a host of other risks, right? Because you're talking about compliance as if we are talking about compliance as if it's a holistic thing. There are 1,000 different things. And so what we do is we put in a series of limit functions. We let the legal department, the compliance department, the HR department set a series of parameters within their environment on work market such that the people actually dispatching the work down in their org can't inadvertently have somebody go out that doesn't have the right insurance, have somebody go out who isn't background checked in the appropriate way, have somebody go out that hasn't signed the right legal agreement. That is enforcing compliance down the supply chain. But the labor compliance is an incredibly, incredibly tricky thing to solve. And at the end of the day, a human being's got to sit there and make a judgment call. Is this person a 1099 or a W-2? And then and with these large corporations, it's got to be a W-2 if you're going to work with them.
And again, when you're with an enterprise and they have scale of lots of contractors and freelancers, they don't want to deal with them individually. They want to deal with a company. They want one throat to choke, and they want to share. They want to push the risk out. Staffing companies really will become insurance companies and recruiting companies.
Do you agree? Okay, well, with regard to stage 2, and then we're going to move on to some questions about stage 3, kind of get more forward-looking here. But there are two other characteristics that I've kind of noticed in stage 2, and I'd kind of like to get your thoughts on them and your feedback. One is that, Gene, you brought this up at the beginning, that platforms are becoming much more verticalized, as individual platforms, or focusing more on types of work and segments of work. And finally, this is the second development that I'm seeing, is whereas before it was you go find a worker, there is a marketplace that occurs, and that's how workers are found and the match occurs. But now more and more advanced analytics are being used and different other ways to curate that online workforce. And so, is this something that you see happening? What do you see? How do you see those types of things happening in your businesses and from your perspective?
We've been investing a lot in that curation and match. We've got a team of data scientists who sit there all day long trying to figure out the algorithm that says the first 3 guys on your list are going to be the ones you should hire.
Right.
It's not quite that easy, but from my perspective, that's how it works.
Yeah.
So,
that's how it should work.
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly. So, I think we've got a ton of data at our disposal in terms of what people, good people tend to act the same way, bad people tend to act the same way. There's enough data that within 48 hours of somebody coming into the network, they start to skew one way or the other based on what you've seen before. And so you look at just not only the public feedback that you see in the ratings and all that stuff. That's the easy part. But there's lots of other behaviors that you can correlate with desirable outcomes.
Does this mean that there will be no more annual reviews?
They just drop into the algorithm, and raise, no raise, you're out. It'd certainly be more efficient. I think we're a long way away from that, but at least directionally, it makes it easier to do a better job at scale. It's not perfect by any stretch.
I completely agree, right? When you are engaging with 2 or 3 contractors, you can have relationships drive those decisions. When there are 10,000 contractors, you need data to drive that decision process. And so the data around, obviously, what kind of work they've done on the platform before, did they get a positive rating on these different parameters, did they show up on time, did they complete their deliverables on time, but then all the data in the back end around how they filled out their profile, how quickly they filled out their profile, all of those things start giving data cues, and so we do the exact same type of stuff with our data scientists around building those algorithms, because people are just habituated to taking that first page of search results Those are the people that they're going to engage in that assignment. They're not going to dig through. And so our job as technology companies is to put forward who is going to be the best person for that role.
Okay. So, let's move on to some questions about, the next stage of things. It sounds like, based on our discussion, there's ample evidence that there was after stage one, there was a whole set of things, and the online staffing segment has, evolved in a number of different ways to where it is today, and it's continuing to evolve along some of those paths. And, stage three, what I mentioned was, what we started to see, and this is extremely recent, and it's, I also wonder why it's happening. You had one answer, I like that answer, which was, it's because of my coverage of the.
Oh, yeah, right.
Space, yeah. But, I don't think that's true. But in any case, yeah. But in stage three, and stage three is just months old. I mean, maybe it's a year old. In stage three, suddenly we started seeing platforms not just being separate, not just being, starting to work together and, integrate, starting to work with other, not just online staffing platforms, but other digital services platforms. And also, Kelly, oDesk, starting to, the staffing industry has begun. There are a number of staffing firms here, some of which are, engaging with online staffing businesses or the concept. So, from a kind of, general standpoint, then I'm going to ask you about your own experiences in your own businesses. From a general standpoint, what I'd say kind of theoretically, what the hell is going on right now? What's happened? What is this stage three? And, what's going on from your perspective, and why is this happening now? What does it mean?
I think it's the App Store that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there's lots of people coming up with lots of innovation, and with open APIs and technology and people focusing on different areas, things are starting to come together to create an overall solution that I think is going to be very individualized by either the person that wants certain things. I can't tell you what Matt just said about the skills and all that. We don't touch that, but I could probably tell you which investments these independent consultants like to invest in, or what expenses what flights they take, because we know all their financial stuff, but we don't have their skills and stuff like work market and oDesk. But I think what's happening is there's different areas of expertise that's coming together, and I think that's natural in an industry that's evolving. And I think is probably one of the biggest trends. I think it's a pretty exciting place to be, quite honestly, but I do think that's what's happening. I think the stage three, as you put it, is people are starting to work together.
And the technology in terms of APIs and service architectures is
Starting to
basically
get
starting to
figured
allow
out.
that. But there's, let's face it, when we're talking about Kelly, Kelly, when I think about Kelly as a staffing firm, I don't think about APIs. And yet, I probably a misconception. But what else is happening? Why?
Well, I think for us, at least on the online work side, I think we've hit a tipping point where, this isn't a strange thing that only small companies or startups or people who can't hire locally do. We're just seeing a broader acceptance of it. It's more comfortable, and I always use online dating and e-commerce as the analogy. When I was dating, I was not going to find the woman of my dreams, or certainly not the woman I would bring home to mom, online. And now I heard a stat earlier this week, 1 out of 3 couples today met online. It's just, 20 years ago that would have been.
Now if we can get divorce online.
Exactly. Just get the whole cycle more efficient. The other, you look at e-commerce. We've gone from no way in hell would I ever store my credit card online to we're talking about, droids dropping a big screen TV in your backyard. I think that's quite an advancement. I don't think we're quite at the end, the droid stage in online work, but it's just.
We have yet to see. There will be droids that are dropping on-site workers into
Right, exactly.
service maintenance.
I said what I want to see is I want a drone to drop a pet bird in my backyard. If you have one flying object delivering another flying object, that's when we've really made it.
Okay. Yeah.
So there. the other factor here is just fear, right? You know, you have a lot of insurance companies that have had these relationships with corporate buyers for a long time.
Yeah, this
The
is
world is evolving, and they know it's evolving, and nobody knows how it will evolve. You know, I don't think that any one of the three of us or four of us would, anybody in this room would say, oh, I know how it's gonna go down. We don't. We know there are a lot of interesting technologies out there. We know that to the extent that technology can take non-value added SG&A out of a supply chain, it will, right? If you can get the ultimate buyer of labor and the ultimate seller of labor together, they will get together. There are obviously industries and workflows in which that's not possible, and that's fine. And so I'm sure all the large staffing firms have been in your offices, they've been in ours, and they all sit there and they say, well, how is the world going to evolve? How are you our partner? Are you our competitor? Are you our, you know, are you the Grim Reaper to us? We say, I don't know.
all of the above, yes.
Potentially, right? And it depends on so many different factors, and labor is so large, there are so many different subsegments. But there certainly are some commoditized labor flows that are going to eventually get disintermediated out of the staffing relationship, right? Because it doesn't matter who shows up. The work has been so commoditized that anybody that fits the right set of skills that an algorithm can determine will be sufficient for showing up. The staffing firms will always be there to discern talent, right? To separate signal from noise, where data can't do it. But how that world evolves, how MSPs play in it and VMSs play in it, and we don't know. You know, all we can do is kind of build the best technology we can and partner where people are willing to take chances, because these are chances. And there's a lot of interesting stuff that will happen, but who knows how it will play out.
Yeah, and the comment about Kelly not being who you associate with API, I mean, we talked to every, I called them all. I called every major staffing firm prior to that deal, and they were the one that, they sort of made the friend or foe calculation, and they looked at where the world was headed, and they realized, hey, this is where the world's headed. And
Let's this is kind of, let's switch from the theoretical, to the relief of
Let's
many.
get some dirt out.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Let's talk about, what's going on in the back room.
Just me
The
and
back
my
rooms
50
of
closest
the
friends.
staffing industry and online staffing businesses. So, of course, you're all involved in certain partnerships at this time, which are, real milestones for the industry. Matt, oDesk, and Kelly have recently announced a partnership, and then MBO Partners, which played within as a independent contract valuation, ICEC, it's easier to say, for a good number of years, has been moving into the online and now partnering with oDesk, there I go again, with WorkMarket. So, I'd like you to maybe just talk about, those partnerships, and we'll start with Matt, and just talk about, what are they about? Why is it happening now? And, you started to talk about what it's about, but, please, tell us more.
Well, yeah, I think for us, it
Especially
was-
all of the inside details. Yeah.
Actually,
Yeah.
I was reading my notes. For us, I think the Kelly partnership is really about making it easier to access the enterprise market in a way that they're comfortable buying. Enterprise companies, they get routines, they've got their processes, they've got their infrastructure, so you can try to build around it, or you can try to offer something else, you can try to rip and replace, or you can find a comfortable way to plug in that's a win-win.
Right.
And so that was the goal for us of the Kelly partnership, was to get a lot of the pieces of the pie that we didn't have internally, that they did. And I think for them, they started seeing the demand from their clients. And staffing agencies have been looking for ways to innovate for a long time, and there haven't been a whole lot of opportunities over the last 10, 15 years. So for them, the ability to bring an entirely new labor pool to their enterprise client base, that was really attractive.
And a new kind of work.
And doing it in a way that's still comfortable and compliant and familiar. So, I think for us it was, how can we take this new thing and package it in a way that everybody's happy?
Great. So your oDesk is working with Kelly, basically to bring, in very simple terms, to bring online work into the enterprise. We were talking previously how that penetration is very low today, but this kind of combination can facilitate that.
Yeah.
Well, Gene and Jeff.
So we knew that we needed to figure out a way to help our enterprise clients who are using us just for engagement of their independent contractors. We knew there was a big value for them and for us to give them a way to kind of curate and keep their own kind of private talent pools that they could distribute work to. And we looked at lots of different companies that are out there doing that, and we also looked at building it ourselves. And when I met with Jeff, the two co-founders of WorkMarket, they convinced me very, very successfully that it's not something that I want to build, and that their focus and expertise on this was clear to me that, hey, you guys do that, let's just figure out how to connect our technologies together, which we've spent the last 6 months doing. And I think it's created a really very interesting solution now that could manage both clients' independent contractors, the engagement of those independent contractors, and even if there's a VMS and MSP, we've been dealing with them for years, so we kind of connected the dots. And the other issue was these types of workers that we've been involved with are, $50,000, $100,000 types of engagements. You can't price that in a way that you're pricing a $500 engagement, and the interaction and the experience is different. So we worked on that, and that's why we did it, and we'll see how it goes. But so far, we're pretty excited about it.
And I think it's worked for both of our clients' bases, right? So Gene's client base was saying, we hear about this online labor marketplace, and they wanted more visibility into resources and some of the technology that we were able to bring to bear. And some of our clients were starting to say, we're starting to get uncomfortable that we are assuming too much worker misclassification risk and workers' comp risk, right? There was a question we would get every time. Well, who handles workers' comp? To which we would say, you do, right? That is your issue. Or alternatively, and the real answer to that in most circumstances is they're independent contractors. They handle their own workers' comp. But you still have them worried about state worker comp boards, you have them worried about their insurance companies coming and saying, yeah, but we have to increase your worker comp rate because we're afraid that eventually those people are going to get classified as your employees, and therefore we're going to have to pay a workers' comp claim on it. And so those were issues that we were seeing time and time again, and Gene and his team were the best in the world at mitigating those, right? Because they're going to handle all the payment of that process.
Great.
And I'll just tell you, in order to make partnerships work, you really need to have the companies align, and there needs to be the teams that really work together. And I'm sure that's something everybody's experienced, but it's not easy to get a partnership to really work well, and I think it's a key ingredient.
Right. Well, I have one last question, and then we'll just open it up here. I've been watching for questions, but no one has signaled, but maybe there'll be more at the end. So, as you know, just about a month ago, I published a forecast report for SIA. I didn't ask for the assignment, but I got it, and it was to do a 2020 forecast for the market size of the online staffing segment, which today is 1.5 billion. So, I came up with a very accurate forecast with a range from $20 to $50 billion.
Quite bold of you, by the way.
Yeah, it was very bold. Yes.
It immediately went into all of our sales decks.
Yes. Now, when I speak privately, I usually refer to the $50 billion number. But in any case, I think it's going to be more than $50 billion. But we have companies like Freelancer.com, oDesk, Freelance, these kind of online companies. It seems to me there's a lot of growth potential there just in small businesses worldwide, and also now, entering the enterprise. We have the on-site online work platforms where maybe there's a tougher going, in my forecast I have enterprise and on-site work actually growing by 2020 to be, greatly exceeding the online work alone. The online work for enterprise is included in one of those other categories. So I'm saying that the online companies don't participate in that growth. But what is your view? Where are things going to be? You know, is 50 billion possible? What is it going to look like? I mean, you know, I know you, Jeff, you said we can't say, but you know, go for it.
Well, look, we can't say how the industry is going to evolve and which players will be meeting in which different segments, and will there be a winner-take-all in different verticals. But look, when you look at the amount of contract labor that occurs in the United States, it's $1.17 trillion that occurs today. If companies have the systems and processes to engage contract labor in the scale that they would like, McKinsey and the DOE predict that 1.17 trillion would grow to 3 trillion. So within that context of massively growing this contingent labor market, can the online staffing market be a $50 billion part of that? Absolutely. Absolutely. We have customers that on their own could spend hundreds of millions of dollars, you know, in 1 year in this space.
I had a conversation with a chief procurement officer who said his contingent labor spend that could go just towards online work every year was $400 million. So I dropped the phone, I picked it back up, and I typed that down. But I think you know, back to the e-commerce analogy, depending on which research report you look at, online, you know, e-commerce is 6 to 8% of global retail sales. So you know, I think the size of the employment pie is pretty damn big.
Right.
You don't have to have all that big of a slice for it to equal 50 billion.
So we, those of you that know, we've kind of commissioned a study that's now in its 4th year. It's by, it was actually Steve King of Emergent Research, has been the independent research.
It's available online.
And it's available online. And we basically made a prediction by 2020, more than 50% of the United States workforce will have been an independent worker at some point in their career, whether it's their baby boom, or whether they're millennium, or whether they take a 3-year stint. And we also measured the financial impact of today, what these independent workers are, and it is $1.17 trillion. And the interesting thing about that, though, is of that, only 50 billion is outside the United States of the US workers. And 60% of that is right in their backyard. So I think a large portion is on site. I think the people with the heavy dollars and heavy projects are the ones that are on site. And I think with the experts being the ones that are going to be in the highest demand and are in the most likely scenario to become independent and do the work they want and work where they want, when they want, I think there's going to be a large, I think it could absolutely be $50 billion.
I have that slide in my sales deck. But
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, well, there certainly are combinations occurring, you know, sharing of information. Yeah. Wonder what the FTC will say, but yeah. Sorry. We'll edit that out. Okay.
You got a question?
Yes, okay, we're ready for questions, and here, I'm gonna give you the mic.
Oh,
Yeah. Thanks.
yes, Mike Rowe from Cloudworks. So great panel, by the way. I'm a little confused, but maybe I'm not the only one. So when you talk about 1.17 trillion, are you talking about contract labor that's coming out of the Infosys of the world, all these big contract companies, or are you just talking about independent, you know, people who are working in a very variety of ways, either directly or indirectly? But what in fact is that market? I'm not too clear on that.
It's people that have self-identified themselves as an independent worker, who are working more than 15 hours a week doing that, so the hobbyists are taken out. And about 5% of them are actually temps, but 95% of them are people that either are in their own business, they're independent contractors, they're freelancers. And that 1.17 trillion is the economic impact, the value they've created in our economy, the airplane tickets they've created, their services that they build. So what is the value that they provided and managed when you add up that there are 17.7 million of these people in the United States? The amount of financial impact they have is 1.17 trillion. And if I said anything wrong, Steve, you could correct me.
And that's in the United States.
So it's not just the cost, it's not the cost of that labor, it's actually the value of the labor.
It's the value.
But another
It's
set
their
of
impact on the
another
economy.
set of data points, Staffing Industry Analysts published 2012 contingent workforce market size or spend segment, estimate, which was something on the order of, I think it was $2.7 trillion worldwide, and that included a small fraction of that. I think it was something on the order of 350 billion was temporary staffing, and then there were a few others, but the largest portion was just independent contractor
Everything
types
else.
of workers, just freelance workers. So that was worldwide, just in terms of spend on those workers, it's something on the order of $2 trillion that was estimated.
Wow. So that doesn't include the emphasis or any of those guys, I mean, those
I
guys.
don't know who that is.
Well,
Infosys.
you know,
Oh, Infosys.
Emphasis, yeah.
No, it's
Oh,
only
no, it
US.
doesn't include the
Oh.
outsourcers, the BPO, and no, so they're
Aren't
not.
they part of the contingent worker?
Not in that estimate, so
Oh,
that
I
would be a
see.
whole other,
All
right, but, yeah, so,
Can I, one last question?
Sure.
John?
Yeah.
So what, so we've got this huge growth that we think is all gonna happen by 2020, right?
Yeah.
So
It's a good
what's the gap here? What are the one or two items that need to happen in order for this kind of 1 billion to go to 50 billion? Other than the fact that it just is a big market, and of course it's big, so it must happen. But what are the things that are really kind of holding the market back, and what's gonna shift there to make that happen?
I think we need to get Andrew to do more research and publish more information so we get the word out.
I would call it a self-fulfilling prophecy.
yeah.
Well, I think the trend starts to build on itself. I actually wrote an article right after oDesk and Elance merged and said, we'll remember this is the time that online staffing really came to the front of the conversation, where it was no longer when a procurement officer or a manager said, hey, I'm gonna go do online staffing, and their boss said, what is that? Where now the question was gonna be, well, which one
Yeah,
are you
that's
gonna
right.
use? Right, and I think that the news that they generated out of that, and then obviously the work that Andrew's doing, and obviously all the customers that we have, but the more logos we go in with to each company, now that we have SAP and Lockheed Martin and Omnicom as customers, that gives comfort to the next guy. But getting those three took me 3 years. Right?
Nothing draws a crowd like a crowd.
Yeah.
And absolutely, even the influential people in the government that manage and report employment statistics, at least we've been trying to educate them that they need to pay attention to this segment of the workforce. And over the last year or two, we've actually seen them starting to pay attention. They used to think independent contractors and freelancers did not add economic value, they just replaced a job that someone else would have. And it's really been, contractors are kind of like, they're the losers. That's changed. It's now startup America, and it's more, there's a psychological change that I think is taking place, and I think in the enterprise it's just gonna take longer for your centralized procurement and centralized HR and centralized legal to realize the genie's out of the bottle, and I better just figure out how to better manage it rather than try to hold it in. So I think it's a lot of that of what Jeff just said is happening, and I think it's a psychological change to our society.
I think the other, risk and opportunity is the regulatory piece that we talked about earlier. Clarity within the regulatory environment. Even if we didn't like the answer, if we just knew what it was, that would go a long way.
Yes, and Matthias, by the way, we have a number of early stage online staffing platform companies in the
Me
audience
one.
today. I'm sorry?
Me being one.
And Matthias is one of them from CoWorks, and Matthias hails from Sweden.
I do. Thanks for remembering. So we work with the sourcing premium talent within the creative sector. We see that real talent actually had an opportunity to get clients anywhere in the world. So I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective on the internationalization of the online work market. I mean, we mainly talk about like really integrated stuff on the W-2s and that on the US market. But I know that oDesk and Elance have tons of talent from everywhere in the world. So I'm kind of curious to hear your perspective on the global online work market or local market. Will we kind of see like hyper specialization where India will provide the rest of us with all IT development and Sweden will provide the designers for IKEA furniture for the rest of the world, et cetera, or what kind of patterns are you seeing already?
Yeah, I think on the global side for us, it's less around, so there are some general trends. Philippines, a lot of customer service, Bangladesh, a lot of SEO, Ukraine, Russia, Eastern Europe, a lot of development work. But you can find great developers in the Philippines, you can find great customer service reps in the Ukraine. So while there are broad trends, it's hard to say that, I can't imagine that one country is going to dominate one specialty. And sort of which skills pop up and grow in different areas shifts over time. In 2008, 2009, Bangladesh wasn't even on the map for us. 2007, Philippines wasn't even on the map. We're seeing, right now, and then on the flip side, on the client side, we're seeing shifts. So a lot of the countries that were historically very strong from a freelancer perspective are now very strong from a client growth perspective. So India, Russia, our fastest growing international country for clients right now is actually the Ukraine. We see Russians hiring Russians, so Russians in Moscow are hiring Russians out in the countryside, and Ukrainians, and Indians are hiring Filipinos. And so I think right now it's kind of this big soup of skills flowing between countries at different rates and different times, and I think it's going to become I guess more evenly mixed over time as opposed to less so.
I think that when you talk about online work, things will go to the lowest common denominator of quality, right? And so there'll be a harmonization amongst the bill rates for different types of work that can be done anywhere, because this is now a global marketplace, right? You can go on oDesk and you can find somebody that will do the same job in the United States, in the Philippines, in Ukraine, Uruguay, and so there will be a harmonization of rates on that front. That won't be true in the on-site world, right? I mean, you can't globalize going and repairing a digital sign, right? Somebody's actually got to do it. You have to localize that, right? And that is one of the movements we see. There are clients that used to fly people in to go do IT projects, to go do marketing projects, sales projects, now can find local talent to go and do it, and therefore they don't have to send somebody halfway across the country to go do things. So very different in terms of on-site work versus remote work.
I want to briefly take issue with one thing you said. The lowest common denominator is actually not what we see in terms of quality. The average freelancer on oDesk, their hourly rate increases by 190% over the first 3 years. And the reason is the good guys get their second job, and the third guy, and the fourth job, and they start to rise over time.
On an individual level or?
On an individual
Yeah,
level.
okay.
Right, so the average freelancer, their hourly, whatever they start at, it goes up by 190%. And the reason is because now you have signals of quality in the market. And we get questions around, well, I look at your freelancers and I don't see anybody with a 3.0. That guy's gone. Nobody hires him, so he goes away. So the good people get their second job, and third job, and fourth job, and once you become a known quantity, you have pricing power. And clients, they don't come in looking to pay $7 an hour for PHP development. They want a really good PHP developer, and they want the best, they want a high quality developer at the most affordable cost, but the quality comes first. So I think we battle that perception a lot, and when you see the reality of what happens day to day, it's actually, most people have pricing power and the rates increase over time.
Thank you guys. Thank you for this panel. That would be a question for Matt, for remote workers. How would you describe the evolution of the average project value that is being transacted on oDesk during the last 5 years? Would you say that you arrived to a matured level, or the trend in the future with the technology advancement will increase the average project value? And where is it today?
Are we releasing our average project value? I don't think we are. I'm the handler here. So I can't go into specifics on that. Did you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's something on the order of $400-something per
Not on oDesk.
project.
It's a multiple of that.
Okay.
So just don't read his report.
That was that was an arithmetic average of some numbers that
Okay.
were provided.
Yeah, so
to
it's
us.
in the
Yeah, okay, so it's
multiple
high.
$1,000 range is the typical average value of a project. That has actually been pretty stable over the years. There's been a little bit of shift because our business has shifted. When we started out, we were all development work. We've seen an explosion in non-technical work that sort of started around 2008, 2009. So we had a little bit of shift then, just because obviously customer service is a very different rate than development. But a lot of the customer service and non-technical work tends to be longer in duration. So it's somewhat compensated, but not completely so. But we haven't, other than the shift between types of work, we haven't seen a lot of difference in within categories.
Any other questions or comments? Mike, coming back to Mike.
Yeah, I get, so, if you look at it from a customer point of view, it seems to me like they're sitting there with a lot of their own current costs, so they got their own labor, they've got current status quo for wherever they are today. And if you start looking at, well, how do I basically optimize cost of labor, right? How do I get the right person to solve the right problems at the right time? It seems to me like they really don't really care so much. I mean, some of the tasks are, you know, on site, some of them are online. We happen to actually, by the way, work with oDesk, and we have several people that we're using on your company, which are great. And by the way, we've developed great trusted relationships. We actually physically go over to visit them. They're that important to us. So it seems to me more like it's a blended, you know, situation that customers are really looking for. Do you see that? I mean, to me, we haven't talked at all about what I call on-demand labor. You know, on-demand means that you don't have a contract where you have to pay them whether you have work or not. You only pay them for what they do. So do you see anything involving there that you know, really from a customer point of view, it's really about dedicated labor and then on-demand labor kind of supplementing that? Do you see that as a future?
We do see a lot of the sort of, a lot of our enterprise use cases tend to be high volume. So we have clients, e-commerce companies who need 50,000 product descriptions written in 10 different languages. And those, they tend to come out over time. So you create the pool of, it's almost a crowdsourced type application, but they want a pool of people who are vetted, pre-qualified, they understand what the client's looking for. But one day there might be lots of work, one day there might not be so much work. So we do see that, but we also still see the, you know, I'm building my customer service team or part of my trust and safety team or core part of my engineering team, that it's going to be an ongoing part of my operation that is less episodic. So we see a pretty even mix. I think the software, people are getting smarter about how to fragment work. So you are seeing companies like Crowdflower and Crowdsource.com and some of the systems like crowd computing systems and Microtask. People are getting more sophisticated in how to use that. It used to be, you could go to MTurk, you could upload your spreadsheet, and half of what you got back was crap. But I think they're getting a lot better. People are figuring out how to do it. And we're starting to see actually roles pop up at enterprise companies that, you know, is a, you know, crowdsourcing manager or, you know, director of crowd labor, or, you know, we're starting to see that as a specific expertise pop up.
I think, like you said, it's a blend, and I think that's one particular type of work solution. We have a particular client that probably many of you would know as a major health insurance provider. And every time you submit a claim to your health insurance company that your doctor filled out, they actually create a pool of medical doctors around the country who are organized by types of skill. And depending on that particular claim, they distribute it to that doctor immediately, and he says, yes, this was a good procedure, you should pay for it. And these are doctors that have regular practices, but they're all part of our community, and we're the infrastructure to provide that, and it's big dollars. And it's, you know, it's a vetted community, obviously, but it's it is kind of what I think you're talking about. But that same client has all the other pieces as well, so it's a mix of everything.
Okay, well, you know, this has been a really great discussion, and you know, let's give the panel a round of applause. And I would also like to extend my thanks to the host of the event tonight, Elance.
That's right.
Fair is fair.
Of course, thank you, Shoshana, and the other people who were involved in making this happen. Thank you very much, and thank you for being a great crowd. It was a great event, and the next one will probably be in 1 to 2 months, and possibly in San Francisco. And my plan is to focus more on startups as opposed to the more established players. So stay tuned. Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.